This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is preparing to vote as soon as April 4th to declassify part of the committee's 6,000-page study on the CIA's secret detention and interrogation programs. The study has set off an unprecedented constitutional battle between the Senate and the CIA. Earlier this month, Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Dianne Feinstein took to the Senate floor to accuse the CIA of secretly removing classified documents from her staff's computers and spying on Senate staffers and their computers in an effort to undermine the panel's report.
If the Senate can declassify this report, we will be able to ensure that an un-American, brutal program of detention and interrogation will never again be considered or permitted. But, Mr. President, the recent actions that I have just laid out make this a defining moment for the oversight of our Intelligence Committee. How Congress and how this will be resolved will show whether the Intelligence Committee can be effective in monitoring and investigating our nation's intelligence activities, or whether our work can be thwarted by those we oversee. I believe it is critical that the committee and the Senate reaffirm our oversight role and our independence under the Constitution of the United States.
The CIA has countered by filing a crimes report with the Department of Justice, accusing Senate staffers of illegally accessing CIA documents. CIA Director John Brennan has denied Feinstein's allegations.
As far as the allegations of, CIA hacking into, Senate computers, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason in terms of what we would do. When the facts come out on this, I think a lot of people who are claiming that there has been this tremendous sort of spying and monitoring and hacking will be proved wrong.
The CIA, meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Committee criticized the Obama administration for closing its investigations into the CIA's actions after September 11th. The UN report stated, quote, the committee notes with concern that all reported investigations into enforced disappearances, torture, and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment that had been committed in the context of the CIA's secret rendition, interrogation, and detention programs were closed in 2012. Leading only to a meager number of criminal charges brought against low-level operatives. Today, we spend the hour looking at this debate. We're joined by John Rizzo. He served as acting general counsel during much of the George W. Bush administration and was a key legal architect of the U.S. interrogation and detention program after the September 11th attacks. The Los Angeles Times described him as, quote, the most influential career lawyer in CIA history. He's recently published a book headlined Company Man, 30 Years of Controversy and Crisis in the CIA. And we're joined by human rights attorney Scott Horton. He's contributing editor at Harper's Magazine, a lecturer at Columbia's Law School. He's author of the forthcoming book, The Lords of Secrecy, The National Security Elite and America Stealth Foreign Policy. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! John Rizzo, first talk about the clash between the CIA right now and the Senate Intelligence Committee. Do you think the report should be declassified? And do you believe the CIA was spying on the Senate staff on the committee?
Well, it's good to be here. Yes, I've stated publicly that I believe that the report should be declassified. It is said to be 6,000 pages long, estimated $50 million of taxpayer money was spent on it. But sure, I think it should come out, as well as what I read is a very detailed CIA rebuttal. I say that even though I assume that the report, given the description by Senator Feinstein and others, will be extremely critical of the CIA's performance during that period. And of course, that would presumably include my performance. But I do think it should come out, yes.
As we just played in that clip from Senator Feinstein, she called it an un-American, brutal program of detention and interrogations. Now, you were involved in providing some of the legal context or justifications for the program post the attacks of 9/11. Could you talk about your assessment of that program?
Well, I certainly wouldn't describe it as an un-American program. I mean, as everyone knows now, that the interrogation program was extraordinarily aggressive, and you know, some of the techniques, particularly waterboarding, could be described as brutal. I don't think any of those techniques, I didn't at the time, and I don't think today that any of them rose to the legal threshold of torture.
Scott Horton.
Well, it seems to me quite clear-cut that certainly waterboarding and a number of the other techniques that were described, both used individually in combination, do constitute torture, have been viewed as torture by the United States. The United States has very aggressively criticized other nations using them. And when Senator Feinstein says it's un-American, she's absolutely right. And in fact, this is one of the principles on which the United States defined itself going back to the Revolutionary War and George Washington, who denounced torture and pledged that the U.S. would treat prisoners humanely in wartime. That's been part of the nation's birthright up until this last conflict. So I think we're seeing something quite profound. Also, I think this is essentially a historical study. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is not looking at a program that's underway right now, that's still being used. It's a review of things that went on in the past. More, certainly most of these practices were terminated at the end of 2006. So it's really astonishing that there is such ferocious pushback to publication of a report. And I think John Rizzo is to be commended for coming out and clearly stating, as he has, that the report should be out there and should be published.
John Rizzo, talk about the main argument you make in your book, Company Man.
Main argument about the program?
Overall, the main point you're making about the CIA, the 30 years of controversy and crisis at the CIA.
Well, I was a career CIA lawyer. I joined as a young guy in 1976 and retired at the end of 2009, having served most of the post 9/11 period as the chief legal officer. So the book is obviously a good, part of it is devoted to the post 9/11 years when my name first became public. But it tracks the. I was fortunate. My career basically tracked the modern evolution of the CIA, and during the course of those 30+ years, I was involved in virtually every crisis, controversy, screw-up that the CIA was involved in. So I thought it was sort of an unprecedented kind of insider memoir that would use my story and my experiences and my observations to describe for the reader how the CIA has evolved in the last 30 years, and that evolution would include, of course, the birth of congressional oversight that occurred right about the time I arrived, and then on through the years through all sorts of crises. The fundamental point is that the CIA is a very resilient organization, and also it must be stated that the CIA manages to get itself into controversies every few years like clockwork.
We're going to break, then come back to this conversation, and we're going to talk about the issues of torture and rendition that the CIA has been accused of. Our guest is John Rizzo, retired CIA attorney, who served as the agency's acting general counsel during most of the Bush administration, author of a new book. It's called Company Man, 30 Years of Controversy and Crisis in the CIA. And we're joined by Scott Horton, a longtime human rights attorney, contributing editor at Harper's Magazine. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back with them both in a minute.